Chapter 71. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. 71 Insecurities and Surprises. Ace drove me back to my place again that night and he insisted on walking me right to my door. I was slightly worried about him demanding that I let him into my room, however, that didn't happen. Surprisingly, Ace offered me a smile and a small peck on my cheek before he was on his way. It might have been my own imagination, but it seemed like he was in a hurry to leave. Given that it was already late at night, it wouldn't be surprising if he was tired or if he still had something to clear up for the day. The work of a CEO still amazed me. Despite how he acts around me, Ace had a lot of responsibilities on his shoulders. Ah! I moaned softly in the warm shower. Standing under the warm shower felt relaxing and it was just what I needed. Because Ace went to the trouble of reminding me of the pleasure that we shared that night at the hotel, I found myself remembering the shower that I had the morning after. My body still felt sensitive from his wild lovemaking. My pussy throbbed and my insides felt slightly sore. Hopefully, the tenderness would subside when I wake up tomorrow morning. I let out another moan when I pressed my fingers against my opening, still wet and slimy from the juices of my release. My fingers stroked my pussy lips and I thought of Ace touching me there and then inserting his thick and longer fingers inside of my hole. My nipples hardened immediately at the thought. What is wrong with me? We just did it. And I'm already thinking of him. Forcing my mind away from Ace and his seductively teasing smile, I quickly cleaned myself and got out of the shower. There is so much work that I have to do and so many things that I needed to improve on in time for my next presentation to the team. Thankfully, I managed to make a lot of progress before being distracted by photos from Kyle's wedding and then. My body shivered from the thought, and it wasn't from fear. I should go to bed before my own thoughts drive me crazy. Sleep didn't come as easy as I had hoped. Even after a long while of having the lights off and my eyes closed, I still tossed and turned in bed restlessly. I could see Ace and I could hear his voice whispering to me like he was a ghost that had decided to haunt me and my dreams. I covered my face with my hands as if that would help me to hide away. Things between Ace and I didn't start normally, and it was moving way too fast. I think I probably made the same mistake with Kyle as well when we first started dating. Looking back, maybe everything about us was wrong from the start right until the end, except for the good sex. Perhaps I was just trying to fool myself that we were a loving couple even when we rarely did anything together because we were too worried about our relationship being exposed. For me, I was scared because I was afraid of losing my job if anyone from our workplace found out. For him, he was probably more afraid of his real girlfriend finding out. Looking back, our relationship was nothing more than meeting up for heated sex and going out on secret dates that ended up in very steamy sessions at random hotels. Noel.n. Fuck buddies is what they call something like that, right? That's it. We were probably just fuck buddies. The fact that he already had a girlfriend that he intended to marry only made it worse. Ace, are we just fuck buddies too now? That night I fell asleep with very mixed and troubling thoughts in my mind. I ended up getting some sleep sometime late into the night purely thanks to exhaustion. The alarm went off and I was thankful to wake up because my dreams were dark and haunting at best. They were the exact representation of my insecurities, and I hated what I saw in my slumber. After turning off my alarm, I instantly got out of bed and headed for the shower. I stared at the dark circles under my eyes before sighing loudly. It was quite obvious what I needed to do, so why was I so hesitant to do it? After getting dressed, I started with my makeup while making sure to apply abundant concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I didn't want to look outstandingly beautiful, I just wanted to look presentable. After applying some lipstick on my lips, I sighed once again. Relationships based on sex don't last. You know that, Karina. I reminded myself as I stared at my own reflection in the mirror. The girl that stared back at me looked too stubborn for her own good. I knew that I had to stop giving in to Ace's advances and that nothing good would ever come from me sleeping with him. My resolve felt firm, and it felt like I had everything figured out for now, but I truly doubt if the same would apply when I felt his tempting caresses on my body and the warmth of his seductive kisses on my lips. I need to stay away from Ace. But how do I do that? Arg! I growled from my own frustration. Why did the bad have to feel so good? My hand covered my lips as if to shield them from Ace's lips. Or my own desires. Ring, ring, ring the doorbell. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and that meant that someone was standing right in front of my door. It was unusual for anyone to turn up to my place. I didn't have that many friends living in the city to start off with, and I couldn't think of anyone who would turn up this early in the morning. My tummy did a tiny flip, and that told me that something was not right. While I was hesitating about what to do in front of my mirror, the doorbell rang again. To be continued. Chapter 72. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 72. First trip with him, coming. I called out before getting up from my seat. This better be something good and productive. It wasn't like I had any mortal enemies that were out to get me, but I was still very cautious of opening my doors to strangers, so I decided to check through the peephole first. I gasped before I placed both my hands over my mouth to stop myself from screaming from shock as my body froze right in front of the door. After closing my eyes and quickly counting to 3, I opened them again and peeped through the hole just to make sure that I wasn't dreaming or hallucinating. Rena. His familiar voice called my name quite loudly, and that alone was enough proof that I wasn't dreaming up this whole thing. Ace is really standing right outside my door. Why is he here? It's so early in the morning. I don't have enough makeup on and I have dark circles under my eyes. What am I going to do? I know that you're in there. Ace said, sounding very impatient. This is my room, and he is the one intruding, so why do I feel like I'm in the wrong here? Plus, why does he sound like a debt collector? Everything is fine, I have concealers under my eyes. I sighed when I realized that I did care what I looked like in front of Ace after all. Good morning. No, that's not what I meant. Why are you here? I asked after quickly correcting myself. Picking you up. Why else? Ace replied like it was supposed to be obvious. He's escorted me back to my place a couple of times before, but this was the first time that he's picking me up. He never mentioned anything about this last night when he dropped me off, though. That I can go to the office by myself. There's no need for you to pick me up. I already feel bad that you have to drive me back here almost every night after work. I said while still feeling very confused. I feel like we've had this conversation before and I dislike repetitions of boring things. Are you ready to leave? Ace asked after complaining. Yes, I replied after recovering from my slight astonishment. Good, he said with satisfaction. Wait. Let me grab my handbag and my phone. I cried out before quickly heading back inside. Quickly. Ace said sternly. I felt his eyes following my every moment as I moved around my small apartment to grab my phone before stuffing it into my handbag. Ace pulled on my arm, and I was out of the room so fast that I was confused once again as to what was going on. Ace didn't say anything or explained anything even when we had gotten into his car. Hold on. Weren't we supposed to take a turn there to head to the office? I asked as my eyes widened and stared down the road that we should have taken. Ace kept on driving as he completely ignored my question and panic. In fact, he really stepped on it, and it felt like we were going faster than before. Ace. This isn't the way to the office. I pointed out. Who says we're going to the office? Ace asked like I was the one who had it all wrong. We're not. We're not going to the office. Then. Where are we going? I asked in a loud cry. You'll see soon. Can you just relax a little, please? Ace said with a mocking pleading voice before he started chuckling at me. The moment that Ace started driving us out of the city center, I knew that it was strange, but I never thought that we would end up at this place of all places. The planes looked quite big now that they were flying low. For some reason that I couldn't comprehend, we ended up at the airport together bright and early in the morning. Some staff were there to greet Ace and take care of his car when we arrived. It still felt like everything wasn't real even when I had gotten out of Ace's car. "Let's go. What are you spacing out for?" Ace asked with a small laugh as he took my hand into his again. "Are we here to pick up someone? Is someone landing here soon?" I asked, daring to have hope that this wasn't what I thought it was. "Are you stupid or are you just playing with me?" Ace asked with slightly narrowed eyes. "Neither. It's an honor to assist you today, Mr. Hill. Please follow me this way. Your flight is waiting for you," a man in a black suit said politely before gesturing for us to follow him. "We're flying?" I asked in whisper. "You just figured it out?" Ace replied sarcastically before he started to laugh softly to himself. His hand around me tightened as if he thought that I would turn and run away. Honesty, that thought did enter my mind for a split of a second, so he wasn't entirely wrong. Where are we going and so suddenly? Now that I knew that we were flying, so many worries filled my mind. He didn't tell me anything about this beforehand and because of that I didn't prepare anything. "Wait, Ace," I said in a small voice as I tried to get his attention. "Keep walking. Let's not be late," Ace said sternly as he continued to pull me after him. It wasn't long before we arrived at our flight. My eyes lingered over the private plane. Why am I even surprised? BDNV CEO or not, Ace is extremely wealthy, so I guess he doesn't fly on normal economy class flights like I normally do. However, now isn't the time to be amazed at the little luxurious spin on our surprise trip. There was a slight issue. "Wait. I don't have my passport with me," I voiced my concern as I tugged on Ace's hand in mine. Ace turned and smiled charmingly at me. "I have your passport with me," he announced proudly. To be continued. Chapter 73. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 73. Somewhere only he knows, huh? How can you have something like that? I asked in shock. What amazed me more than the private jet was the fact that Ace never failed to amaze and surprise me over and over again. "The office got one made for you for business purposes, right? Remember?" Ace asked as he waved a passport book in front of me. Shit. I totally forgot about that. How loosely does the company manage these documents? Ace can get his hands on anything so easily. Where are we going? I asked once again. "Get on and I'll tell you," Ace said teasingly before winking at me. "What if I told you that I don't want to go?" I asked as I refused to follow him. "I wouldn't believe you even if you did." "Get on, you'll want to go where I'm about to take you," Ace said with certainty. "Where is he going to take me? Just where is this flight bound for?" While I was still debating my very limited options to myself, Ace heaved an impatient sigh before turning to face me directly. "Rena, if you don't get on the plane on the count of 3, I'm going to carry you," Ace said slowly and very clearly. "You're kidding," I muttered, although I knew that he was far from joking. 3. Ace started counting. My eyes widened in shock as his light hazel brown eyes stared down at my face. Shit, I really don't have a choice about this, do I? 2. Ace counted down again. Arg. Okay. I cried out in defeat. Once again, I found myself dancing to Ace's tune like his favorite little puppet. After getting on the plane, I sat in a very comfortable leather seat next to Ace and we were on our way somewhere I didn't know. "So can you please tell me where we're going now?" I asked. "Sure, since the plane has taken off, I can tell you where we're going," Ace replied teasingly. I arched a brow at him in disbelief. Was he that scared that I would get off if the plane was still on the ground? "Where are we going?" I demanded for an answer. "The country with the biggest dog meat trade," Ace stated with a serious face. "Oh. Wow, really?" I exclaimed in excitement as the reality of this sunk in. Yes, really. How else are we going to come up with anything real if we haven't seen, felt, or experienced anything real? Ace said before turning to grin at me. So, this is a business trip. I mumbled. Are you disappointed, Rena? Did you think that perhaps this was a date or a honeymoon trip for us? Ace asked teasingly before he chuckled. No, I did not think that. You should have told me in advance. You planned this ahead, right? You could have told me. I complained as I pouted. Ace laughed a little at my reaction. If I told you then it wouldn't be a surprise. Ace replied casually. I didn't pack anything at all. Also, I'm your secretary, so if you wanted to arrange a trip, you should have told me. I could have done it. I continued to complain while Ace continued to laugh at me. He seemed to be in a good mood, and although he had literally just hijacked me on a plane to a foreign country, I still couldn't truly find it in me to be mad at him. The way he laughed made him look younger, and the sound of his laughter tugged at my heart. Soon, I felt warm and strange inside, like I was feeling happy for no reason at all. Before I knew it, I was smiling a little. Maybe I was happy that he decided to take me along on this trip with him. It's going to be so fun. Let's learn a lot of new things together. I want us to have some solid ideas on how to approach the storyline by the end of the trip. We can't afford to lose to the other teams, Ace said before smiling brightly at me. Lose to the other team? What do you mean? I asked, confused. Oh, right. I guess I haven't told you about this either, Ace said in sudden realization. He never tells me any of the important things. I just wanted to roll my eyes at him. Care to explain, please? I demanded before pursing my lips into a thin line. This is something we do very often when we start on a new project in the CEO's office. We form small teams of 2.3 people, and we compete to come up with the best idea for the storyline. Of course, it doesn't have to be the whole storyline, and it doesn't have to be anywhere as detailed as the final version, but it must be good enough to lead the direction of the work going forward, Ace explained. Really? So, the other people are also going on trips? I asked curiously. Some of them are, I supposed. Not all of them. Everyone is either paired up or in a small group now, and some of them are visiting some dog meat farms and markets. Others have other ways to get ideas. It's all up to what they decide as a team, Ace replied casually. Are we going to visit the farms and the markets too? I asked, my excitement truly taking over. After doing so much research on the topic, I was more than interested and invested. I was eager to learn more, and I had to agree with Ace that nothing would beat seeing and experiencing the real thing. Of course. Why else are we flying over there? Ace replied before chuckling. He reached his large hand out and patted the top of my head before stroking my hair softly. In the short amount of time that I've worked with him, he's done that quite a lot. I'm not your dog. I muttered softly. Who says that I think that you're my dog? Ace asked teasingly before he began laughing a little. I am definitely not his dog. To be continued. Chapter 74. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 74. Flying with him. His hand didn't stop caressing my hair playfully. Ace was really in a good mood, and his positivity was starting to rub off on me. Suddenly, Ace took a lock of my hair and placed it against his lips. I watched as he kissed my hair tenderly as my heart skipped a beat and my chest clenched tightly. Ace. I whispered his name softly. I don't do this to my dog. Ace mumbled as his eyes lingered on the lock of my hair that he held between his fingers. Or this. Ace whispered. My body froze when I felt the heat his hand on the side of my neck before he started stroking the side of my neck tenderly with the tips of his fingers. His face came closer to mine, and I soon felt the heat of his lips on my cheek. His kiss was soft and more playful than demanding. I felt heat rush to my face, and I knew that I had started to blush wildly. Or this. Ace whispered again. This time his lips approached mine. He's going to kiss me. Please. No more. I protested in a breathless whisper as I tried my best to push him away. I can't do this anymore. Any more of his teasing attention and I'm really going to lose control. I just decided this morning that I'll try to keep my distance from him, and look where I ended up. Despite the difficulty that I had to go through to steel my resolve, I found myself on a private jet all alone with Ace on the way on a trip that had no one else but us. I must be going crazy. You're right. We can have some more fun later on. After all, this trip is a whole 3 days. Ace declared happily. 3 days. I cried out in shock. Oh, I didn't tell you. Ace said innocently before he smiled at me. You never tell me anything. I muttered before sighing depressingly. Don't be like that. I'll make sure to tell you next time, okay? Ace cooed like he was talking to a baby. I didn't know what to say to him anymore. Words won't change anything. Since I'm on this trip with him anyways, I might as well make the most of it. Strictly speaking, there was nothing wrong with this trip. We are going there to get some work done, so this is a business trip and nothing more. It's going to be quite a long flight. I suggest you get some sleep. Want a blanket? Ace asked with a caring smile. It's so unfair when he smiles and acts all caring like that. It makes me feel so confused inside. No, thank you. I replied before turning the other way. The announcement from our pilot telling us that we are about to land woke me up from my sleep. I didn't even remember when I had fallen asleep. Glancing over to where Ace was sitting, I found out that he was already awake and as alert as ever. Had a good rest? Ace asked before smiling over at me. Yeah. I murmured softly in reply. I did manage to catch some sleep during the flight. It compensated very well for the lack of good sleep from the night before. I still felt slightly sleeping and dizzy, but the excitement that I felt as I looked forward to the trip made me feel so pumped up. You look so excited. Ace stated his observation with a teasing smile. That's because I am, I admitted honestly before returning his smile. I'm excited too. This trip with you is going to be fun. Ace stated with certainty. I wasn't sure if we were looking forward to the same type of fun, but I was willing to let that slide for now. After landing at the airport, Ace rented a car so that we could drive around. To my surprise, Ace seemed to have everything planned out already. When did you have time to work on all this? I asked in amazement after getting into the passenger seat of the car. Ace was driving and I was his only passenger. It was a pleasant surprise that Ace seemed to know where we were going and what we had to do right off the bat. I'm efficient at my work, he replied confidently. Aha! I murmured without knowing what to say. Says the guy who sneaks off to take naps and skip out on meetings at work. Let's check in at the hotel first. We'll be meeting our local guide there. As you've probably figured out already, most people don't speak English here, so we're going to need a local guide who can take us around and also act as a translator, Ace explained flawlessly. You're right about that. Wow, you really have everything thought out. I said in admiration. I can't believe the CEO of such a large company actually went to all the trouble of planning and preparing all of this. The dog meat trade business is a very local business with many small operators and markets. To really get to know how it works, we need a local to take us there, Ace continued to explain as he kept his eyes on the road. That I might need to stop over to buy some things, I said a little shyly. We can do that. That's not a problem. There are some things that I got the hotel to prepare for you already, though. You can take a look at those first and then we can go buy whatever that you need, Ace replied casually. Thank you for doing all this, I thanked him wholeheartedly. No worries. Let's just enjoy the trip together, Ace replied carefreely. It was quite a long ride to the hotel because the airport was located quite far from the city center. From the private jet to this overly luxurious hotel, I had a feeling that this trip was eating up quite a lot of the company's budget. Ace looked extremely at home when we arrived at the hotel and the concierge politely greeted us. We arrived early in the afternoon, so I hoped that we could get some work done today even if we didn't have the whole day. To be continued. Chapter 75. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 75. His manipulative scheme. Let's check in first, Ace said as he offered me his hand. I looked down at his open palm as I hesitated. Since when did it become the norm for us to hold hands? Ace gave me a confused look and I found myself slipping my hand into his much larger one. He gave my hand a comforting little squeeze before he led me after him into the hotel lobby. My eyes fell on where our hands were joined as I wondered if he would hold my hand all the time during this trip, and perhaps, even after that. Do I want that? There's only one room. I asked in total disbelief. Yes, there is no mistake. Only one suite room is booked, the receptionist repeated before flashing me a polite smile. Did the company suddenly run out of budget or something? I looked accusingly at Ace, who just shrugged his shoulders before smiling sweetly and innocently my way. He planned all this. I should have known. Is there another room available? I asked hopefully. The beautiful woman just shook her head before apologizing in a soft voice. She's got to be kidding me. It's okay. I guess I can stay in some random business hotel nearby. I said as I started taking out my phone to find a hotel near here. We don't need another room. She'll sleep with me, Ace told the receptionist before wrapping his arm around my shoulder. Woman looked at Ace and before her eyes shifted to me, and then she smiled as if she completely understood and was glad that the issue had been resolved. No, this isn't. I began correcting the misunderstanding immediately. He gave her the wrong idea about us. This is insane. Let's go, Rena. Ace drawled seductively as he pulled me along towards the hotel elevators. My mind was a mess during the entire elevator ride as I tried to figure out my next move. Ace was just too manipulative for me to deal with. The way he manipulated me so easily into doing things the way that he wanted was simply scaring me out of my wits. We arrived at the room and Ace tapped the keycard before pushing the door open. I bit my lower lip as I tried to come up with some excuse that would get me out of this situation. I could imagine a long list of scenarios that might take place if I slept in the same room as Ace, and in none of those scenarios did I manage to make it through the night with my chastity intact. Come in, Ace invited me into the room before him. I took a few steps into the room before I heard the door closing behind us. The suite was a very fancy one and must have costed a lot. The entire place was decorated in various shades of blue that was pleasant to the eyes with modern luxurious furnishing. There was a living room with a sofa and a dining area. There was also a work desk and an adjoining bathroom. The other door was opened, and I could see the bedroom through there. Everything was great apart from the fact that there was only one bedroom. My eyes immediately zoomed in on the sofa and my mind was immediately made up. You, my dear sofa, will be my bed starting from tonight. The things that I ordered for you are in the bedroom. You should take a look so that we can buy the other things that you still need, Ace said as he pointed towards the bedroom. Okay. Thank you. I replied softly. I entered the bedroom and while I was looking through the very extensive pile of things that Ace had prepared, I could hear him talking on the phone. From what he was saying, I figured out that he must be talking to our local guide. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised at how thoroughly Ace had gotten the hotel to prepare things for me. I lifted up a new set of underwear as I stared at it in awe. I had no idea if I should feel relieved or freaked out when I looked at the tag on the bra and found out that he had gotten even my bra size right. Did he figure that out when he touched my breasts? Is that a common skill for men? I didn't think so. I had to admit that having underwear was better than not having any. Rest and freshen up, Rena. We're meeting our guide in 15 minutes at the hotel lobby, Ace called out to inform me. All right. I quickly replied. Hello. My name is Rung and I will be your guide for the next few days, our local guide politely introduced himself. Nice to meet you, I'm Karina and this is my boss, Ace. I said professionally. Nice to meet you and thank you for agreeing to help us, Ace said kindly. It's a pleasure. During our trip, I will try my best to explain everything and translate everything for you, Rung told us reassuringly. Being always full of mysteries and secrets, Ace had not told me where exactly we were headed for today with our local guide. Now that the guide was here, he was the one who drove us around. According to him, some of the local roads could be tricky, especially during peak hours, so he preferred to be the one driving. Ace and I sat at the back as Rung navigated the heavy traffic of the city center. Where are we headed? I asked curiously. One of the largest wet markets in the city. Because we don't have much time today, all we can do is visit the market which is close to the city. The other places that Ace wants to visit is quite far from here, the guide explained. I nodded my head in understanding. It went without saying that the wet marketing that we were going to visit sold dog meat. The traffic was quite bad as the guide had anticipated, but soon, we arrived at the market. My feelings about seeing the real selling and buying of dog meat was very mixed. On one hand, I wanted to see the real thing and experience the vibe of the market. On the other hand, I was simply frightened and slightly disturbed. To be continued. Chapter 76. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 76. Down to business. I want to interview the sellers and some of the buyers as well. Can you help me out with the translations? Ace inquired enthusiastically. Of course, it is my job to do so, Rung replied, followed by a laugh. Come this way. I will take you to the section that specializes in dog meat. I don't know what you've heard, but dog meat isn't eaten by every single person in this country. I, personally, don't eat it, but of course there are many that do. It's a matter of preference, you know. Rung explained as he led the way through the throng of people. As it turned out, the wet market was very big and had many sections. According to Rung's explanation, dog meat was sold in a small section in the market because of the niche market that it caters to. It wasn't as common as poultry, pork, and beef. There are specialized restaurants that sells it. Usually, it isn't sold randomly or mixed with other meat. Rung explained further when we arrived at the dedicated stores. So, all these stores here sell dog meat? Ace asked to clarify. Yes, all of them from here to over there. Rung replied while pointing his index finger to the end of the area. That's more than I thought. I mumbled to myself. The market is much livelier in the morning when there are more buyers, but coming now is also good because if the store is too busy the store owner will not have time to talk to you, Rung said as he led us closer to one of the largest stores. Can we take photos? Ace asked. Of course. Nothing to worry about, Rung replied casually. I gulped when we got close enough for us to see the meat that was on display. The meat that was chopped up resembled any other type of meat that I've seen displayed in the meat sections of supermarkets. However, there were other more wholesome versions of the meat that basically looked like a dog that had just been skinned. I closed my eyes momentarily to collect myself. To me, it was a disturbing and difficult sight to take in. Rung began making small talk in the local language with the store owner while Ace and I just looked on. Both of us didn't speak the local language and had to rely heavily on Rung. After a short while of chatting, Rung gave up the thumb up sign that it was fine for us to interview the middle-aged lady who owned the store. Why do people eat dogs when there are other types of meat available? Ace began asking. Rung quickly translated Ace's question into the local language to the shopkeeper. She nodded her head to show that she understood before she replied to Rung. She says that it's part of their culture. Many people believe that there are health benefits from eating dogs that other meat cannot provide. Some just prefer the taste, Rung translated smoothly. Is that belief common only for the older generations or for the newer generation as well? Is the demand for dog meat dropping over the years? Ace asked. Once again, Rung translated Ace's questions and the shopkeeper replied in their local language. I took out a voice recorder and a notepad and began taking notes so that I wouldn't forget even the smallest detail. She says that younger people don't eat dogs anymore because it doesn't conform with the culture from the West. Old traditions are starting to fade. She says that even her kids want her to stop selling dog meat. They want her to switch to sell other more normal types of meat or just quit and retire. She says that she doesn't want to do that because she still has old and long-standing customers to serve. Rung translated again. What does she think about people from the West or other cultures being very against the dog meat trade? Ace asked curiously. She says that it's not her problem. She doesn't care what other people think. Cultures are different. There are things that she doesn't like about other countries' cultures too, but she tries to understand them. She thinks eating dog is the same as other cultural traditions, it should be preserved and passed on. She says the people who like it should get to eat it and people who don't like it can just eat something else. Rung translated bluntly. What are her thoughts on unethical dog farms? Does she think that it is common or if there's a solution for that? I asked. She says that she doesn't source her product from those types of farms. There are many farms that operate professionally just like chicken farms, and she doesn't see any issues with that. Of course, she thinks that unethical and illegal farms should be shut down. She thinks that those unethical farms that people see in the news are overrepresented. Most dog meat farms don't look like that, Rung translated while listening to the shopkeeper's response. After a few more questions we moved on to another stall where we asked the shop owner similar questions and got very similar responses. After interviewing a handful of shop owners, we switched and started interviewing the buyers instead. It was clear that the buyers of dog meat were from the older generation. Most were probably around my mum's age, and we didn't find any young buyers in the teenage range at all. I had many pages filled with notes by the time that we decided to call it a day. Before we turned to leave, Ace called my name to catch my attention. What is it? I asked as I turned back to face him. Do you want to try eating it, Rena? Ace asked quite seriously. I blinked my eyes rapidly at his surprising and unexpected question. Since this project started, I had considered many things such as my point of view regarding the matter, but not once have I thought about trying dog meat. No. I'm fine, thanks. I quickly declined. To be continued. Chapter 77. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 77. Like a couple, really. We're here now, so I'm sure that Rung can take us to a restaurant that serves dog meat. Right, Rung? Ace suggested with a smile. Yes, I can. It's not that hard to find, to be honest, Rung replied with a nod of his head. That's fine. I mean, if you want to you can go ahead and try it, but I personally wouldn't. I stood my ground. If you say so. Let's head back to the hotel then, Ace said before he reached for my hand. Rung led the way out of the market to where he had parked the car. It was getting quite cold now that the sun had set. It was about time that we leave because most stalls in the market had already started packing up. Your hand is a little cold. Are you feeling cold? Ace turned to ask me with concern in his voice. I did feel a little cold. This was my own fault for not checking the weather forecast and underestimating that this country could be so cold. A little, but I'm fine. Thanks, I replied before smiling a little at him. Ace yanked softly on my hand before gently placing my hand into the pocket of his jacket along with his hand as his hand continued to hold mine. It felt very warm and the blush that inched up from my neck to my cheek also helped to warm me up. Let's hurry back to the car, Ace told me casually before I could protest or pull my hand away. We made it back to the hotel and parted ways with Rung after thanking him. He would be here to pick us up in the morning. Tomorrow, we had plans to visit a few dog meat farms. Things were starting to get very real on this project and I found myself feeling excited although slightly scared. I was certain that seeing the poor animals in poor conditions in real life would have a bigger impact on me than seeing the same content in photos or videos. I'm hungry. Let's have dinner. Ace said lazily as we stood next to each other in the hotel's lobby. Sounds like a plan, I replied in agreement. Local food somewhere outside or hotel food? There's a rooftop restaurant that's got a nice view, Ace presented the options. Local food, I replied without hesitation. Okay, my lady, Ace readily agreed. Despite my original worries of being alone with Ace on this trip, I found Ace surprisingly easy to be around. The Ace that was walking casually at my side on the side of the road as he held my hand in his felt like an entirely different person from the devil CEO that everyone was used to at the office. Perhaps the fact that he wasn't in his business suit helped with softening his image somewhat. However, the real change was his character and the air about him. Ever since this trip started or even perhaps before that, whenever we were alone Ace would show me a different side to him. He was kinder, more cheerful, and more relaxed. Of course, he still retained his slightly twisted sense of humor and his love of teasing me in both versions of himself. Everything about him was new, refreshing and it excited me to no end. Walking around the night street with Ace in the slightly cold weather made me feel like we were really a couple on a night stroll together through the busy street of the city. Many couples walked around holding hands with each other just like us. I couldn't help but wonder if that was how the other people saw us when they saw us together like this. Rena. Ace yelled my name suddenly. I let out a small cry when I felt my body being yanked forcefully to the side before my body landed against something hard yet very warm. Ace's chest was against the side of my face when I opened my eyes after recovering from the shock. I quickly realized that he had his arms around me and was hugging me tightly after pulling me into his warm embrace. Watch where you're going. A motorcycle almost hit you. Did you see that? Ace complained loudly with intense worry in his eyes. His brow furrowed into a frown as he stared down at me with worry. I did realize the motorcycle whizzing by after he had pulled me into his embrace. He was right, I was probably spacing out just thinking about him. I'm sorry. Thank you for saving me, I said in a small voice. Be more careful next time. What are you going to do if I'm not here with you? Ace continued to reprimand me. Well, you're here so. I replied before smiling sheepishly at him. Ace just shook his head at me as if in disbelief. I wasn't sure if he was scared of me getting hit by a motorcycle or if he just wanted to hold me close, but I spent the rest of the walk being wrapped in Ace's strong arms as he hugged me close to him from behind. The position made walking feel quite strange, but the warmth of his body against my back more than compensated for the additional difficulty. We chose a local restaurant that wasn't too far from the hotel and enjoyed a relaxing meal of the local cuisine. Ace seemed wrapped up in his own thoughts as we ate the food together in silence. I tried to read up on the notes that I had taken during our trip to the market, but it was a real challenge to keep my eyes from straying towards Ace's face. What are you thinking of? I asked softly. Ace's hazel eyes shifted to look at me before he smiled. I admired the beauty of his teasing smile while I waited for him to answer my question. I was thinking about the various point of view that the sellers and buyers told us today, Ace replied simply. Same here. Actually, I've got many points down here in my notes, I said as I gestured to my open notebook. To be continued. Chapter 78. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 78. His mischievous plan. Don't just study the facts or people's opinions, try to form your own opinions and think of an angle that would be appealing to the audience too, Ace advised sternly. You're right. I whispered with a firm nod of my head. He was probably right that I tend to get wrapped up in what other people thought rather than focusing on how I felt about things. We needed to come up with an angle and storyline from this trip, so I had to keep that in mind as well. It was clear that Ace was way more focused on the work than I was, and he probably had some ideas on the storyline proposal already. On the other hand, my mind was still pretty much blank. The only thing that comforted me was that the trip had just started. There are still a couple more days for me to put my thoughts together, and hopefully by then, my creative juices would help my brain come up with some unique and appealing ideas. When we made it back to the hotel, I was more determined to get some work done rather than tired. The warning that Ace gave me seemed to have triggered a burst of energy. However, the moment that we walked into the hotel and Ace gave my hand a slight squeeze, I was reminded that we would be spending the night together in the same room. Suddenly, I felt extremely uneasy. I'm going to sleep on the sofa. No matter what he says. To my surprise, Ace tugged on my hand and led me in the opposite direction of where the elevators to our room were. Ace, where are we going? I asked as I was dragged after him. A place where we can relax and do some thinking, Ace replied before he turned and winked at me. Starstruck by his superstar smile, I found myself following him without asking any questions. A place where we can relax and think must be some kind of business meeting room that the hotel had available for private bookings. Ace must have planned ahead again and booked us one of those so that we could go through our notes for the day more seriously to wrap up the first day of our trip. He's such a hard-working man. There's so much that I still need to learn from him. We're here, Ace announced proudly as he dragged me through a pair of double doors. The sign that greeted me was one that I definitely did not expect. My mouth dropped open and for a moment, I was at a loss for words. Why did he bring us here? I thought you wanted to talk about work. I asked in pure confusion after I had managed to recover the usage of my tongue. We are going to talk about work. Among other things. Ace replied, completely unfazed. I looked up at the large sign above our head again before I shook my head at the image that was immediately conjured up in my mind. No, there's no way that we're going in there. Private jacuzzi and sauna, read the sign above our head. I cocked my head to the side, still in disbelief. Was this what he had in mind all along? Of course, that was the case because he had a booking for it. I'll wait for you in the hotel room, I quickly said as I began taking a step back in retreat. Where are you going? Come on in. Ace encouraged invitingly as his hand tightened around mine and began pulling on my arm. This is crazy that I am not going in there. I exclaimed in shock. Yes, you are. I've got the place booked out so there's no need for you to act so shy, Ace said calmly. That's not the point. I quickly countered. Stop struggling, or I'll just carry you, strip you, and dump you in, Ace said as he smiled mischievously at me. I could tell that he was serious and that made me pull back harder against his hold on my hand. No, wait, please let me go back to the hotel room. I pleaded. If you're too loud the staff will come running, Ace warned playfully. Ace. Please, I whimpered weakly. Sure, I'll carry you like a princess. Ace suggested like that was the brightest idea in the world. Ace lifted me up into his arms with ease, and just like he had just stated so proudly, he carried me princess-style deeper into the jacuzzi zone of the hotel. Now that we were inside, I was thankful that it truly seemed like we were the only ones there. Considering how late it was into the evening, that didn't really come as a surprise to me. Ace placed me down on my feet in the dressing room and his hands were immediately on my clothes. My eyes widened in shock when I realized that he was going to strip me. No, don't. I protested as his hands began stripping me of my clothes. I told you that if you're not going to take off your clothes yourself, then I'm going to strip you. Would you rather go in with your clothes on? That would be an interesting sight to behold as well, Ace mocked me mercilessly as his large hands continued to tug and pull on my clothes. He's just unbelievable. His hands were insistent and very impatient as he pulled each article of clothing off of my body. It wasn't like I could really struggle against him. His hand jerked and tore at my shirt as buttons went flying in his impatience to get me naked. How did things turn out this way? When Ace succeeded in parting the fabric of my shirt from my body, he pulled me closer to him before he buried his face in the side of my neck. His warm lip kissed my sensitive skin before sucking softly on it while I tried to turn my face away to escape him. Ace wrapped an arm around my waist to prevent my escape as he began sucking harder on the side of my neck. Ace. I whimpered his name in a breathless whisper. To be continued. Chapter 79. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 79. Irresistible seduction. Ace moaned softly before the tip of his tongue began licking my neck. No, I'm so sweaty. I protested as I tried to push him away from me. You always smell and taste good, Ace whispered huskily when his lips left my neck for a moment. As if he wanted to get that point across, he boldly licked my neck before trailing small kisses down to my collarbone. When his tongue snaked out to lick and tease my collarbone, I moaned as my breathing quickened. His hands reached behind my back to unclasp my bra and his hands skillfully removed it from my arms and body. Ace. Please, I protested in a weak voice. I hated myself and how weak I was against his art of seduction. I hated how my voice came out sounding so sweet and breathless, like I was begging him for more rather than pleading for him to stop what he was doing to me. No, please, that I'm so dirty right now. I protested in embarrassment. Ace didn't heed my warning and buried his face in between my breasts before his hands cupped them and began massaging them. I threw my head back and moaned from the intense pleasure of his hot manly hands squeezing my naked breasts. The way he massaged them made my body writhe from unbelievable bliss. My nipples hardened immediately as he rubbed them against his palm while his hand continued to pump my breasts. I love playing with your tits. You smell good, Rena. Ace coaxed seductively with his face buried in between my breasts. I felt the wet heat of his tongue run a line along the sensitive skin in between my tits and I cried out. My cry echoed throughout the dressing room and my body froze in shock. I didn't think that I cried out that loudly, but the small, enclosed room made my cry that much more lewd and loud as it echoed back at me. Ace, ah. I moaned while I tried to lower my volume. It was extremely difficult considering that it was the only way that I could think of to keep myself sane amidst the pleasure that Ace was making me feel. When his fingertips pinched my hardened nipples at the same time, I cried out as I felt like I was going to lose my mind completely. Your moans are so sexy. This feels good, doesn't it, Rena? Ace teased me. I let out a choked-up cry when his mouth engulfed one of my nipples before the tip of his tongue began lapping against my swollen nipple. He twirled his tongue skillfully in circular motions against my nipple while I cradled his head and ran my fingers through his hair. My legs started to go weak from the stimulation as his hand continued to pump my other breast. Please, I moaned even louder when he began sucking hard on my swollen nipple. The current of pure pleasure pulsating through my body from the perk that he was sucking felt unbearable. My body throbbed with need as my juices squirted out of my pussy hole onto my underwear. He's making me so wet for him again. I could no longer control the reactions of my body as it began writhing against his large and hard frame. Let's get you out of your clothes before you sink to your feet, Ace said after his lips left my nipples. I was a panting mess by that time, and I was glad that he realized that I could hardly stand up on my own 2 feet anymore. My breath came out in short gasps as I stared up at his handsome face. Ace looked down at me with desire clear in his eyes before his lips smirked mischievously at me. You planned this? I whispered accusingly. I have no idea what you're talking about, Ace replied lightly without a care as his hand dipped down and began unbuttoning my pants. Get in here, Rena. Ace said before he grinned at me. Ace's hand approached me as he stretched his arm out to offer me his hand. I stared down at Ace from where I was standing next to the jacuzzi while I hesitated to get in with him. After sucking and playing with my breasts until he was satisfied, Ace quickly stripped me and then himself before he dragged me after him to the private jacuzzi that he had booked in advance. I always admired Ace for how well prepared he was for everything, but this was just too much for me to take. What was running through his head when he planned this trip that made him include a dip in the jacuzzi with me as his companion? I just had no idea what goes on in his head anymore, and as always, I had a very difficult time in dealing with him. Naked with nothing but a very small towel to cover the front of my body from my breasts down to the top of my thighs, I stood awkwardly on the side of the jacuzzi. Ace looked up at me invitingly as he waited for me to take his hand. Without hesitation, Ace got into the jacuzzi and began to relax. His wet dark hair only made him look sexier, and so did the small beads of water that stuck onto his muscular arm and chest. "Come, Rena," Ace repeated, and I snapped out of my daze. "I don't think," I murmured as I averted my gaze from his intense gaze. "Are you still shy?" Ace asked with an amused chuckle. Of course, I was, although I didn't want to openly admit it. The heat that rushed to my face although I wasn't yet in the warm water probably gave me away because Ace continued to laugh at me. "Give me your hand, Rena. If you don't get in soon, we'll be here all night," Ace said in such a gentle voice that I felt extremely swayed. It didn't seem like Ace would have it any other way. With a resigned sigh, I slowly placed my hand into his much larger one and he helped me get into the jacuzzi with him. To be continued. Chapter 80. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 80. Hot and wet pleasure. The jacuzzi was quite large and was probably made for a small group of people instead of just the two of us, but that meant that we had more room to move around. I wished that I could say that that meant that I had private room to myself away from Ace, because that wasn't the case at all. Naked and in the water, I tried to use the water to hide my nakedness from him while Ace kept staring at me with an amused look on his face. He probably thought that my reaction was funny or entertaining to watch. Although he's seen me naked before, I still didn't feel comfortable to just hang around together with him in my naked form, and the fact that he was also stark naked wasn't helping my poor little heart at all. "Why are you hiding so far way over there?" Ace asked lazily. His arms reached for me and soon I found myself settling back against him. The heat from his body along my back as he pressed my body back into his made me very aware of how close he was to me. I could feel his warm breath against the back and side of my neck as I sat with my back to him in between his legs. His arms wrapped around my waist as he whispered my name tenderly into my ear. My body trembled at the sweetness of his husky voice close to my ear. "BDNV, Ace." I whispered his name although I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. "Your skin is so soft and fine that I really like touching you." Ace complimented my skin as his hands began stroking my arms. A soft whimper escaped my lips when his hands changed its destination of his soft strokes to my waist and then the plane of my stomach instead. I sucked in a breath as he caressed my tummy before his hand dipped lower and began stroking my thighs. My body started feeling hot, and it wasn't because of the warm water that I was sitting in. "Ace, please don't," I protested softly before I moaned. Just as his large hands were teasing the soft skin of my thighs, his lips began kissing and teasing my earlobe. My body shivered at the sensation of his soft and warm lips playfully kissing and then nibbling on my earlobe. When his tongue snaked out and licked my ear, I let out a small cry that echoed loudly in the small room. My body writhed in his arms as his hands began its journey upwards along the insides of my thighs. "Ace," I whimpered. "Should I just relax, Rena?" Ace coaxed seductively into my ear. Please," I moaned before pleading to him. My impassioned voice giving away the desire that I felt for him as my core burned with the heat of my own need. His fingers slowly stroked their way up my inner thigh as my hips began moving about under the warm water. The temperature of the water seemed to make me feel even more sensitive than usual, and I could feel his touch so much more on my skin. "Spread your legs for me, Rena," Ace whispered lustily into my ear. His large hand helped spread my thighs wide apart as I whimpered softly at the sensation of my pussy lips being stretched open wide. After spreading my legs, his hands went back to resume their torturously pleasurable caresses against the sensitive flesh of my upper inner thighs. I moaned as I imagined the pleasure of his touch against my most sensitive feminine spot. Leaning back my head against his broad shoulder, I closed my eyes and moaned passionately. I moaned lewdly before I bit down hard on my lower lip to keep my moans to myself. Ace's fingers finally arrived at their destined destination and began stroking the heat between my widely spread legs. I was certain that my love opening was flooded with my juices as my pussy continued to clench and spasm non-stop. His fingers stroking the folds of my pussy felt so good and relaxing. It's very slippery here. Did you get wet, Rena? Ace asked before he started kissing the side of my neck. Ah. Not that there, I moaned loudly when his fingers found the swollen sensitive seed in between my legs and began stroking it. His fingertips stroked my hardened clit in circular motions while I moaned my pleasure. My hips began moving lewdly as it thrusted up and down, pushing my pussy against his playful hand. I grinded my clit against his fingers harder and harder for more pleasure. Let's take it slow, Rena. We have the whole night. Ace whispered suggestively as his fingers on my clit slowed. Ah, Ace, I whimpered sweetly as the pleasure of his touch slowly flooded my entire being. His slow and gentle petting of my clit felt so delicious. It was like a pleasure that was soft and easy to handle, however, it soon became addictive to feel him softly caressing me there. My body slowly relaxed against his as I let my body and mind enjoy the joy of his touch. What do you think are the most useful things that we learned today that could be used for the commercial storyboard? Ace asked me as his fingers continued to move against my swollen clit. My mind was in a haze and work was the last thing on my mind right now. I moaned as my mind struggled to focus on the question that he had just asked me. Unlike me, Ace seemed fully in control of his desire, and he didn't seem bothered about our intimacy at all. That's right, he did mention that we should discuss work when we came back to the hotel. Is this his idea of a late-night work meeting? I don't know. I managed to reply in a strangled voice. I could barely think straight, let alone think of any ideas for the storyboard. What he was demanding of me felt so unreasonable. His fingers wouldn't stop stimulating my clit. I could feel my pussy getting wetter and hotter from his seductive caresses. My hips began moving again, thrusting a little to rub my clit against his fingers. To be continued.